in the environment that was provided for Skinner. And by the way, in this particular part two of Lab Rats, I'm going to refer to Skinner a lot. And as from yesterday, you all should know who Skinner is, okay? And if you're not familiar who Skinner is really the prototype. Black people are the prototype of the Skinner that you saw in this Skinner experiment project, okay? But with the environment that had been created for Skinner, meaning you, and knowing that Skinner expresses himself or expresses that environment through his own body. Have you looked at how we walked and how we dress? Believe it or not, we can determine where people are from depending upon how they walk, how they dress, and how they talk. You think about that. If you create the characteristics that you hate, then the actions of self-annihilation fuses its own flames. So Skinner now expresses himself through violence, through killings, through fights, through shootings, giving the experimenter justification in furthering the exploitation, robbing, and enslavement of a whole Skinner nation. You think about that. And prisons and jails are enslavement. Check the 13th Amendment. Now, in inducement of the self-hatred, the experimenter creates an image of positivity or greatness, meaning that he makes another Skinner so that the other Skinners can look up and want to be like that. But in this inducement, self-hatred process, this Skinner rat cannot attain that status that the experimenter made or projected as a great Skinner. You think about that. And what does that do for the original Skinners? It causes them to have low self-esteem, and they soon develop a complex of inferiority. And the creator of the experiment makes the unattainable Skinner a white one. Why? Because he knowing that the black and brown Skinners would go as far as to bleach their skin to reach the desirable attainment of that Skinner rat that he placed out before their eyes, dangling like a carrot on a stick. That's serious business. You think about that. Another example of Skinner is another example of self-inducing self-hatred is allowing Skinner to see how to get out of his environment that has been created for him, yet denying him the very necessities to get out of that environment. You think about it. You think about that. Now you think you got education, you got a right to do that, you got a right to do this, and you do have an opportunity. But guess what? What happens in all of this here? And I want to tell you why it happens. Because, like I said, the experimenter makes more self-inducing self-hatred because he will allow Skinner to see his way out of the environment, yet deny him the tools or necessities to get out of the environment with. Now you think about that. You say, well, you got the same schooling, you got equal opportunities, and thus for. But through all of this experiment, the experimenter has created a backward way of thinking lab rat. Can't think straight. He can think sideways, but he can't think straight, making him undesirable. Making him an undesirable Skinner, even in his own environment that was created for him. Now that's the real Milli Vanilli for you right there. You think about that. Lab rats. Our experience as Skinner has been this way since chattel slavery, and by no means don't think that it has changed because it looks like we've made some type of accomplishment or step forward or ahead when nothing has changed, not one atom's weight. Now, those who were bought here and sold here, because there were some of us already here, but those who were bought here and sold here were bought here for the purpose of servitude and free labor. Now you have to ask yourself, has anything really changed? You think about that. Even with all of our degrees and knowledge, we still serve the interests of other people versus our own selves, and consistently supply free labor through the criminal justice system. You would be amazed at the big retailers who get their products made from inmates. JCPenney and Victoria's Secret are just two of them. Even Bob Barker, you've heard of Bob Barker. Even Bob Barker has his hand in prison industries. He had, look up on the toothbrushes of the inmates, look on their deodorant, you know, and who manufactures that stuff? It's crazy. And it is only until you look at the true nature of the experimental and the experimentee and ask yourself if that power relationship has changed at all while one is looking at a false reality filled with superficialness. If you can be whatever you want to be, seeing that they sold us on that idea that we can be whatever we want to be in this created environment, then my question becomes to you, then why haven't you become that which you could become? I'm just saying. However, in all of this madness, there are interactions that are not even examined. And yet, when we look at the created character and the jobs that this Skinner lab rat applies for, he or she almost have to be a half black Skinner and a white Skinner to obtain the employment position that they are applying for. In fact, what does that do? That leaves you with a what? White person and melanated skin. I mean, it's requiring you to remove all knowledge of yourself and replace it with theirs. Anybody familiar with other dictionaries besides the Webster Dictionary? I mean, like the Oxford Dictionary, you know, like word black in the Oxford Dictionary. In fact, in the 16th century, according to the Oxford Dictionary, black meant what? Stained with dirt, soil, foul, having deadly or dark purposes, death, painful, someone being sinister. This is the definition of black in the 16th century in the Oxford English Dictionary. Yet, these are the very same people who are the most deadliest on our planet, yet they define the Skinners worse than they are. And once again, there's that word define. And they define you as being worse than they are. And remember that when you create hate, when you create that which you hate, that hate is expressed by the created character, lab rat, and it becomes his own mechanism for what? Self-destruction. Death and destruction that the experiment has been performed on the lab rat, he, the experimenter, still makes you feel like you are more disgusting and evil than he is. And from his standpoint, it is absolutely necessary. A reversal of thinking along with mental, moral, and values must take place in that rat so that the true culprit can hide his true evil agenda. And the victimized one must find himself guilty. Once again, foul, iniquitous, atrocious, horrible, wicked, and disgraceful. Why must the lab rat find himself guilty when the experimenter is the one who's exploiting him and denying him and performing all other experiments that the rat can't even control, because the rat doesn't have no power in the environment that the experimenter has created for him? Yet and still, you look for these very same experimenters to solve your problems when you go out there and do what? VOTE for them. Voting for a people who desires for you to stay in your created environment. Is that making any sense to you? Let me ask you a question. How many of you out there are Democrats? And how many of you out there are for the Republicans? Well, the reason that I asked is because, did you know that it was the Democrats who actually enforced slavery and wanted slavery to continue, while it was the Republicans who fought for the abolishment of slavery? And it wasn't until like 1950 that both political parties, switched the tables. Yeah, and now the Democrats are so-called the allies of the very same people that they enslaved. And the Republicans are the enemies of the very same people that they helped set free. Like I said earlier, a superficial reality. This is absolutely necessary. It is, according to the European viewpoint. And like I said, yet the fundamental relationship between the lab rat and the experimental of the created character has never changed. You sleep with them, you marry them, you have children by them, you go to school with them, yet the psychological and social engineering is quietly working at hand behind all of this that is seen in this false reality. And they make these laws so and so, and they make it available to you, or shall I say a privilege, and this privilege can be revoked at any time without giving any thought to the lab rat. And consequently, this has become the destiny of the rat, because the thinking and behavior of his own existence has been manipulated by the experiment. And this is the reality of a people who look to their experimental for validation and truth. Look to the experimental for self-definement. Write your books, educate you, provide jobs for you so that you can function in the created environment that promises failure, frustration, and death with little success. Yet we find nothing wrong with the environment. You think about that. The lab rats are not working at all to change the environment for a better living and for the future of their children. We're not doing that. We're not doing that whatsoever. And I said that we must change our own environment if we are to live. Because living like Skinner, you will surely do what? Self-destruct. self-destruct. Just look at our situation. Anytime you let someone else define you, write your dictionaries and tell you who is civilized and who is not, who is a criminal and who is not a criminal, and then you accept that, you have accepted self-hatred. And if you, by all means, got a white Jesus on your wall, please, by all means, take it down and have some respect for yourself. And some of my created, characterized brothers and sisters actually accepts the divinity of the experimental, yet not understanding that it was the experimental who usurped the very divinity of the rat himself. I'm just saying. If the experimenter is not going to treat you right, what makes you think the experimenter is going to teach you right? So therefore, by divine right, Skinner has the right to self-educate himself with some truth and rightly interact with other lab rats to change their environment for a better future. Making sense? I really hope it is. You know, I mean, you think about our situation. I mean, I know that it sounds impossible, but yet it can be done. And I mean, we can just start with one block of people who are committed to changing the environment. And in regards to the color of divinity, historically, the color of divinity is black. Just ask the black statue of the Madonna in Rome, or the black Moses at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. I'm just saying. And like I say, we already know about the phallus symbols and all of that stuff that the European has stole, and understand what it symbolizes, yet many black folk still don't understand what it means. So if you don't understand what it means, you can go back and watch Egyptian Mythology 101. Okay? But getting back to the subject, yeah, the color and divinity, the color of divinity, and that which was black. Like I said, you can check that out in DC, the Moses at the Library of Congress, and you can check that out, the Black Madonna over there in Rome, okay? But in this book, they got this book entitled Negroes of the South, The Anatomy of White Supremacy. And in that book, the European is forced to degrade the black man and woman to justify his own behavior, and therefore creates an environment to further justify their servitude and inferiority. As in the words of Winston Churchill, and I quote him, "I do not apologize for the takeover of the region of the Jews from the Palestinians in the same way that I do not apologize for the takeover of America by whites from the Red Indians, or the takeover of Australia from the blacks. It is natural for a superior race to dominate an inferior one." And that's Winston Churchill. That's Winston Churchill. So you all think about that. Listen to what the man said. For those white experimentals who read that book and read that book, it literally instructs them to do so. And it is these types of books that don't interest the lab rat, because that type of behavior doesn't really exist in our own melting pot environment, that false reality of superficialness that has been created for you by the experimenter. You say that you're integrated, yet you're still segregated. And if you think I'm lying, just ask Oprah, who recently tried to purchase a home in the Virgin Islands among white people in a predominantly black island, and she couldn't even move there. So you tell me about that. You think about that one. Okay? But as I was saying, even all the way down to the mental castration, they mentally cripple you and then say that you qualify to run in the race knowing that you will lose, so that they can further justify the false self-complex of superiority in that environment that they created for you. Make sense to you? I really hope that did. And speaking of experiments, once again, we black people and even white people are targeted, and I'm talking about children now, but specifically black people, and I tell you why young black males. I'll tell you that in a minute. But right now, cases have gone up among black people, young black men, young grammar school children have been diagnosed with autism. They are 20% more likely to develop autism versus their white peers. Why is that? Vaccinations. According to the CDC, and I'm talking about yesterday, okay? Not last year, not last month. I'm talking about yesterday. The CDC admitted that the government suppressed their announcement of how mercury destroys neurons and nerves in the brain for the growth and the development of that child. I've told people this years ago, but they thought once again that I was crazy. Yeah, the government silenced the CDC on this. And now it's all out in the open, another big scandal. Years ago, we didn't have all of this autism. Like I say, young black men, why young black men that's in school have a more 20% spike than their white counterparts? You think about why. We just spoke about you being a lab rat, right? And they know that injecting your child with mercury will most definitely stunt the growth and development and thinking process of that child. And as for you parents, I blame you for some of that, for not even researching that which they put into the body of your child in the sake of vaccination, when knowing that they have been known to experiment on black people. Sounds like a new Tuskegee experiment to me, whereas they gave black men syphilis and lied to them and said that it was a whole nother shot. You understand me? To see what the effects are, what kind of stages it would go through without even being cured, and what would be the result of these people. But not only that, they would continue to infest themselves with this, because they would have sex with one another, once again causing self-genetic annihilation. But these are the very same people that you trust and look up to for validation. I remember when I was coming up, we didn't have all of these shots. And it's safe to say that there was no mercury used at that time. Why would they be using mercury now? I mean, even though it started maybe like 10 years ago. The same time I told people about this was the same time I had told people about Stephen Campbell. Okay, and this was back in the 90s when I was telling people about Stephen Campbell and how he exposed the cell phone companies and told people how they was getting brain tumors from the cell phones. I did this way back then, but now what is being seen and heard about the cell phones? But they killed the black man, of course. Just like they're killing you. Just like they're killing me. Even with the H1N1 shot, how many people did they kill? But they say in the sake of medicine and for the flu. They give you the virus. Silly people, once again. That's incredible. And that don't even bother you. Lab rats. Lab rats.